Welcome to another edition of Anthony T's Horror and Wrestling Show. I'm Anthony T. In this edition, I will be having reviews of not one, but two films. First, the regular review in What's Anthony T Watching at the end of the podcast, where the podcast critic in me gave in Too Late at Night with the Devil, and I've decided to review the film even though it uses AI. And we all know how much I think about AI. For those who don't know my opinion on AI, I really believe it should not be used in cinema, period. But this is probably going to be the way going forward in filmmaking. And I'm just going to have to sit there and live with it. Because literally, I don't like AI for anything, quite frankly. Especially filmmaking. But anyway, the podcast critic in me won. And I decided to review Late Night with the Devil. As this is a film I've been wanting to see since the beginning of this year. Ever since the hype for this film started. That will be at the end of this episode. I will also review next segment a film called The Black Mass. Now you're wondering why I'm reviewing two films this episode. Because my review of The Black Mass will lead to another segment. As I will chat with Scars Magazine founder Raymond Dowaliby as we talk about the relaunch of Scars Magazine, why he and his team made this film such a focal point in their return issue back. As I really love Scars Magazine because I remember reading it when I was young. This is like back in the early 2000s. Sure, it was hard to get, but still I found a way to get the magazine. And of course, I support local projects. And this magazine's based out of Rhode Island, where yours truly is. So, it's always good to support local stuff as well. So he will be on the podcast to talk about his magazine and to talk about The Black Mass and a few other things as well. But first, I want to talk about a little bit about the passing of Roger Corman. Now, when I first got into Roger Corman's films, I remember back in the day on Showtime, he would have a series there that lasted for like 2 seasons called Roger Corman Presents. It was like a mixture of sci-fi, horror films that would run on Showtime, and it would air there. It was back in the day where pretty much you could put independent stuff on Showtime, on HBO, on the big cable networks. Now, it's almost impossible, literally. You may be able to sneak some on Showtime, but it's pretty much impossible to get someone like a Roger Corman film or a Charles Band film on Showtime or HBO. Now, back to what I was saying about my first introduction to Roger Corman. I remember watching this series a lot because I've watched some of the films in that series, like Black Scorpion 2, Vampirella, Not of This Earth, Sawbone, it goes on and on, Alien Avengers 2. These are like all low-budget, independent type films that would air on Showtime. And back in those days, you could get those films there. You could get a film like Carnosaur on those channels. In fact, I probably saw that film on one of those channels back in the day. It was one of those weird sci-fi horror films. And that's what Roger Corman would produce, basically. He's also known for his films too, like Bucket of Blood, Little Shop of Horrors. But to me, he's more of a producer because I've known him from films that he produced back in the day, such as Joe, Dante's Piranha, Galaxy of Terror with Sid Haig and Robert Englund, Forbidden World, Death Race 2000 with the young Sylvester Stallone, Slumber Party Massacre, even though he was uncredited as a producer, Sorority Party Massacre, which he was uncredited. He would also do a lot of more uncredited stuff. He would also appear in mainstream films. I remember one time seeing him in a film called Apollo 13, which was directed by Ron Howard, who got his start from Roger Corman. Also, directors who got their start from Roger Corman included Joe Dante, who I just mentioned, Jonathan Demme from Silence of the Lambs, James Cameron from The Terminator, Aliens. So, Roger Corman did a lot for the independent film scene. In fact, probably my favorite Roger Corman produced film is probably not a horror film. You might think that, but it isn't. It's a film called Rock and Roll High School. It stars PJ Soles and the Ramones. I just loved that film when I first discovered it on Blu-ray, because it was like one of those films that looked like it was right up my alley. Plus, I saw its sequel way before I saw that film, in which Roger Corman had nothing to do with. But still, I wanted to see the original film. And I really do think the original film is a very good film. Anyway, Roger Corman was literally one of the few independent film producers left. He was like one of the big three in the 90s. You had him, Charles Band, and Lloyd Kaufman. Those are pretty much the three that survived everyone else through the video store apocalypse, as those three kept producing movies while a lot of these independent producers folded. And sadly, we lost, I think, one of the greatest independent producers of all time, as we're now left with pretty much Charles Band and Lloyd Kaufman. As Roger Corman was really a pioneer of this whole independent horror filmmaking. As without Roger Corman, I don't think you get Charles Band or Lloyd Kaufman. I just don't think you get those two. Or them having the knowledge to stay relevant after a long period of time. Because Roger Corman was able to stay relevant to almost his death, as he was literally producing movies up until, I believe, 2019. He might have had a couple more afterwards, but the last major movie he produced was Death Race 4 Beyond Anarchy, which was for Universal. That and Cobra Gator. And Abduction was the last one, which was an action film, nonetheless. So, pretty much 2019. Roger Corman had a long career in filmmaking that, went decades. You cannot say that with many filmmakers or producers to have careers that went on for decades, like Roger Corman's career did, as he really did push for the independent film movement to the point today now where it's taken on a whole new level with all this underground filmmaking and stuff. But it started almost with him back in the day with films like The Pit and the Pendulum, Bucket of Blood, Little Shop of Horrors, those films. Roger Corman is a producer that was a trailblazer for many independent filmmakers. And he is a producer that will be sadly missed. At this time, I would like to offer my condolences to the friends and family of Roger Corman. Every day there's a family struggling with hospital bills to care for their sick child who is fighting an illness. There's a woman who is fighting breast cancer and is having trouble making ends meet while paying for their treatment. And there are burn victims that are going through treatments to heal their deep wounds. There is a charity in the horror community that helps these people. Scares That Care is an organization that helps families deal with the bills for their
child. They help women get the treatment they need to fight breast cancer, and they help people who are dealing with severe burns get the help they need to heal. Scares That Care is a 100% volunteer organization and 501c3 nonprofit charity that is dedicated to helping these people in fighting real monsters. To find out more information or to donate to Scares That Care, you can go to www.scaresthatcare.org. Every donation helps Scares That Care fight real monsters.
Yes, I'm doing 2 reviews here this episode. First up is The Black Mass. Next segment, I'll be interviewing Scars magazine founder Raymond Dowaliby, as we'll talk about the magazine. We'll talk a little bit about The Black Mass as well. I figured before I bring you that interview, I'd give you my thoughts on this film. Now, this is a film that I've been hearing a lot of buzz about, playing at a lot of film festivals. So, I was definitely very interested in seeing this film when it came out on Blu-ray earlier this year. So, I thought to myself it was the perfect time to watch this film finally. As I was going to originally try and review this earlier in the year on this podcast, but never had the time. But since I have this interview coming up, good time to review this film. Now, going into this film, I just heard a lot of buzz. It had a good trailer. I kind of went to this blind, even though on the back it said inspired by real events. I didn't bother to research the events, and it's probably for the best I didn't. Because sometimes you just want to go into a movie blind, which was the case here with The Black Mass. But with all the buzz and everything, I wanted to see this film, so... Plus the fact, if I researched this film before I reviewed this film, I don't know if it would have had the same impact on me, because mostly the average viewer is not going to research whatever events supposedly happened in this film before watching this film. So I wanted to give that perspective of the review. With that said, I am not a person that sits there and listens to true crime podcasts or watch films based on true crimes, or not into any of that nonsense, because I think it's just glorifying the murderers by putting out all these true crime podcasts and everything. It's just glorification. So I don't see those things or listen to those things unless I hear something really positive about it, like in movie form. I'm not going to bother with it because I don't like movies based on serial killers. Seriously, I don't. It's like cannibal films. I don't like watching cannibal films. I refuse to watch cannibal films. Serial killers, the same thing. For different reasons. Because serial killer films are just glorifications of the killings. I don't want to watch that type of film in my horror. Sorry. It's like the cannibal genre, where they eat up people and kill innocent animals. I don't want to see that in my horror films. Sorry. But then again, this had a lot of hype, so I decided to watch it. And what I saw was very chilling from start to finish. As The Black Mass was definitely a well-executed serial killer horror film, as it left me terrified. One of the reasons why is the fact that this film has this chilling tone throughout this film. I like how the fact that writers Brandon Siegel and Eric Pereira do a very good job in the way they capture everything in this film. Whether it's the story of the film, whether it's the way that they do a very good job in really making the tone of the film be very dark, very chilling, very horrifying throughout the entire runtime without any breath or breather, because that really helped add to the uneasiness of this film. Because this film was a very uneasy watch for me, as there's a lot of shocking things going on, as every minute of this film was chilling. I like the fact that this is told through like a 24-hour period. That was another reason why the chilling tone works so well in this film, is the way they structured this film. They don't go all over the place. They don't try to be campy or anything. They stay on this one horrific and chilling tone throughout the entire film. And another thing I really liked about the screenplay, I don't know if it was the screenwriters or the director, Davini Pin, who chose the idea to keep the murderer's face obscured for most of this film, because I thought that was a really good move, as it added more frightening and chilling depth to the story, as you are watching a story that is inspired by real events, and you are really just sitting there horrified. Especially that last third of the film, it's very uneasy to watch. This was an uneasy film to watch from start to finish. It was the fact that this screenplay really doesn't give you any time to breathe. You're stuck following this killer throughout this entire film. It made for a very chilling watch, as I was like sitting there really on the edge. Another thing that I really liked about this film was the direction by Davini Pin, who's an actress in the indie film world. This is her directorial debut, and this is a film where I think she does a very good job with her direction, as she really nails everything in this film. She nails the tone of the screenplay. She nails the way she directs her cast. She also nails the fact that everything had a dark and gloomy feel to it. Whether it's the dialogue scenes that she had to direct, or the way that the tone of the screenplay she had to work with, she made everything look horrifying on screen. It contributed to this uneasiness feel, which you're supposed to get with a film like this. This isn't one of those films where you're just gonna sit there and have a moment where you'll actually feel safe. This was just 80 minutes of non-stop dark and chilling action. Even the dialogue-less scenes felt frightening, as those scenes really gave me chills, literally. It had like vibes of John Carpenter's Halloween at the beginning of the film. This is one of those films that you couldn't tell that this film was Pin's feature film debut as a director. Before that, she directed one short film back in 2011. You just couldn't tell, as she really did a great job with this film, with the way she handles the material, the dialogue scenes, the acting aspects. It's something you probably see out of someone who's done 3 or 4 films. Because at the end of this film, I wanted to see her direct another film immediately. And that's like very rare for a debut filmmaker, where I say that they do such a great job. I want to see them not wait 4 or 5 years to direct another film. They should find another project quickly or start coming up with one. Because I really think Davini Pin has the talent to be a very good director if she chooses to focus more on that aspect along with her acting. As she did a great job handling this complicated material and directing it. She also gets a very good performance in this film from Andrew Skykes here, as he really does a great job in the lead role in this film. He does a really good job making his character very terrifying on screen, whether the way he delivers his dialogue or the way he walks or mannerisms. It's just chilling. It's that downright chilling, his performance in this film, as he really does a good job making this guy very frightening and making this film very uneasy, because this character was very uneasy. Probably one of the more uneasy characters I've seen in a while in a horror film. It's a credit to Skite's acting that he does a great job in making sure that the killer in the film is truly terrifying and someone you're frightened of. As for every minute in this film, he was frightening. Whether it was the beginning of this film or the end of this film, he never let up in his intensity of his performance in making his character very horrifying, which also added to this film's shocking and chilling tone throughout this film. You can have a great script, but if you don't have the right actor to pull it off, forget about it. It's not going to work. But this movie has it, as the screenplay was chilling and intense and horrifying, and Andrew Skykes turns in a very good performance and makes you terrified at the villain of this film, which adds to the chilling tone of it. Overall, definitely check out The Black Mass. It's a very good film, no matter if you're into true crime films or not. But I recommend you do not research this before you see this film, because it works a lot better if you go into this film blind, like I did. With its very chilling and frightening screenplay and its very good direction from first-time feature filmmaker Devanny Pinn, The Black Mass is a shocking and chilling film that doesn't let up from the beginning until its shocking end. 5 stars.
Welcome to Dark Discussions, your place for the discussion of horror film, fiction, and all that's fantastic. A weekly podcast where the discussion is about the most recent horror and genre films. Intelligent talk on a genre that deserves intelligence. A conversation between co-hosts discussing not only the film, but also the connotation that the directors and screenwriters are trying to articulate. When you want more than a review, listen to Dark Discussions.
And speaking of perception, there's just one more scene I want to talk about, which is after Caleb discovers that Kyoto's a robot. Kyoto kind of peels off her skin, showing him what's underneath.
Now, wait a minute. I know where you're going with this, but tell me you weren't already thinking this 15 minutes earlier in the film. Exactly what he's thinking at that moment.
Which is he's a robot, too.
Oh, I considered the possibility.
Right, and that's what I like, is the fact that the writers were smart enough to know that this is what the audience would be thinking.
We've all seen Blade Runner.
Right, exactly.
www.darkdiscussions.com, wherever podcasts are found.
Welcome back. I am here now with Ray Dowaliby, the founder and owner of Scars Magazine, which has recently come back on the scene in the horror magazine world. How are you doing today?
Good. How's it going?
Good. Now, Raymond, what made you want to get into the publishing business?
Well, it was kind of something I always was into horror magazines. So once I got older and I actually was working in publishing, I was like, I can do this. And in 2006, I said, well, I can probably do this on my own and do something that I truly like. So that's what, like, Famous Monsters, Fangoria, all of those, Castle Frankenstein, I'm going back to the 70s. So that's everything that made me want to do this. So I said, I'm going to do it. And I started it.
Tell everyone about Scars magazine.
We basically, the name Scars, I can't actually take full credit for that. I was working with somebody on a different magazine, and I said I wanted to make one. And he said he was throwing names at me, and then he threw out Scars, and that stuck. And what scars are things that leave an impression, and they leave marks. So I figured that would be perfect and put everything in the magazine that left an impression or will leave an impression or leave a mark. So the name stood and stayed. So that's basically, we cover everything that you would consider something that got you into something else. Music, movies, books, art, photography even. So that's what we like to do. We like to mix it up a bit.
Now, the magazine was first started back around 2006 and based out of Rhode Island.
Yes.
What made you want to start up the magazine for the first time?
Believe it or not, it was always in my head, and I went to a convention. It was Rock and Shock, and I met Gary Clark from Day of the Dead. He played Private Steel. So we began talking, and the subject of the magazine came up, and he just looked at me and he goes, do it. Don't wait. Do it. And he gave me his phone number, his address, and we became really good friends. And he was the main reason why it took off out of my head and into the computer and onto a page. So I owe that to Gary, who unfortunately has passed.
Yeah, and he's also, I think, one of the most memorable characters in that film, Day of the Dead.
Oh, absolutely.
What were some of the influences in films that made you want to pursue this even further?
When I was 5 years old, my uncle, Owen Haskell, set up a movie projector in his house and aimed it at the wall, and the very first thing I ever saw was bits of, like, the Castle. There was a company called Castle that had 8mm film strips, and he would show that on the wall, and the very first thing I ever saw was the Wolfman's foot breaking the mist. And then I saw all those scenes, Dracula walking down the staircase with the candelabra. So that was the very first thing. And then the same uncle took me to the first screening of The Shining when I was 12. Then he took me to the tour with Stephen King and George Romero of Creepshow. So those are the things that left the marks on me. So I owe my direction to my uncle. So that was how that all came to be.
Now, the magazine is different from other horror magazines, in my opinion, as this is focusing more on independent horror films. What made you go in that direction as, say, composed to many other major horror magazines like Fangoria or Horror Hound?
Well, when you pick up a Fangoria and a Horror Hound or anything like that, I mean, they're amazing magazines. Production-wise, they're fantastic. But when you pick those books up, you see the same things being covered because that's what the press releases are. Press releases, and the press releases drive you to try to focus on stuff that's big money. I felt that it was kind of necessary to go in the opposite direction and really try to cover people who are working their butts off and in it for the passion, hoping to get the money. So these people need some kind of exposure, and I wanted to do it in a way where the magazine makes them look like they already are. That was my goal with that.
Now, I noticed in remembering purchasing a couple of the issues back in the day, you had interviews from people like Adam Green, Danny Trejo, before they hit it big. What was it like having them a part of your magazine back when it was first starting out?
When it was first starting out, I was just happy people were interested. And then to get Danny Trejo, to get Adam Green, we covered Hatchet. We had Hatchet on the cover, and he said, would you have any problem putting the grossest thing possible on the cover? And I'm like, no, I think that's fantastic. So we did that, and then we did the screening of Hatchet and put one of those magazines on everybody's seat, and then it just seemed to blossom, and people would say yes. We had Rob Zombie in the magazine. We had so many different, and I look back and I go, wow, we had James Gunn. And it was before everybody took off huge. I mean, Rob Zombie was huge, but we got really lucky. And it's like, those are the things I look back on and go, wow, I think we did something here.
What would some people can expect from a past issue of your magazine, as they're available online through MagCloud?
I think we hit all kinds of subjects. We did a Glenn Danzig issue that we were supposed to get an interview but didn't, so we just did like little editorials about Danzig. We did a King Kong 76 issue. We did an 80s issue. We've done, I think we're at issue number 25 with the Black Mass, but I mean, everything, we tried to make it different every single time. And that's the goal going forward. Again, we don't want to be just horror. We want to be things that would leave an impression with you. So I would say dark culture, maybe. And then again, with the music and the different styles. So, I mean, you can go back and get back issues that cover independent horror, studio horror, and then you can have independent films like stuff like David Lynch puts out and things like that. We just try to be as different as possible with every issue.
Why do you try to be different in every issue compared to, say, the major ones?
If you go to the same restaurant every day and eat the same thing every day, you get a burger, and you get a fry, and you get a drink. Once in a while, you kind of want to have something different. And I'll probably say that's the reason. I don't want to be the same because people get bored. And I don't want to be boring. I don't want people to go, every issue it's going to be a slasher movie on the cover. Every issue it's going to be a zombie. Every issue it's going to be, something that they've seen a million times. So hopefully I can veer everybody I'm working with on the magazine, which is an incredible crew. We've got a bunch of people that contribute. And, with everybody doing this, I don't think it will ever be boring. Hopefully.
Now, I can't escape without asking this question. What caused the first incarnation of Scars magazine to shut down in around 2011?
I would say everybody had life start to happen for them. And not just that, it was like there were a certain amount of disappointments and speed bumps that were occurring in that period of time. So I think we needed the break. Everybody needed the break. And what was great is we never said we were stopping. It just stopped. We just slowed down and trickled and then kind of let it sit. And then this past December, I started getting messages and being tagged in Facebook stuff, and there was way too many things to ignore, and it was all based around Scars magazine. And then Fallon Masterson, my co-editor, was telling me the same thing. She was getting tagged. One of her relatives bought her a Scars magazine that they found in a store in Providence, and they didn't even know that she was part of it, and bought her the magazine and handed it to her for Christmas. So we just started talking again and said, hey, maybe we should do this again. So we did. We started it up.
Now, besides that story, were there any other factors to bring Scars magazine back from the dead?
Just timing. I think it was just timing. And it was like, we need to do this again. I think we all needed it again because it gave us a sense of purpose that wasn't just mundane everyday stuff. And that I think is the most important, is the purpose that it gives you. And everybody works well together. So I'm extremely grateful for everybody that I work with.
What were some of the challenges that you face in bringing this magazine back?
Just thinking, can I do this again? It's been so long. Am I going to remember how? Will anybody be interested? That was another big thing. But the minute we said we were back, I already had my first cover already all set, working with Michelle Romano and Devaney Pinn on the Black Mass. Michelle was unbelievable. She just filled me. She gave me every single person that I needed to contact. I had so much content on that film that it happened on its own. It did itself. So the whole magazine was filmed. I had the photographers, I had actors, actresses, Eva Hamilton, everybody. They were all amazing. Nobody said no. Everybody contributed, and it was fantastic. Andrew Kern, amazing. Raw of the Dead, and he's the photographer for a lot of stuff. Amazing. And they all contributed and all made it happen.
I was going to ask you this later, but a lot of this issue is focused on that film, The Black Mass. How did you first discover this film?
Through Michelle Romano. Michelle Romano has been a part of Scars since just after the Hatchet issue. I met her at conventions and we started talking, and she wanted to be in the magazine and she had the drive. So fast forward a little bit, I had a conversation with Michelle and I said, listen, you need to be a producer, because you have so much drive and so much energy and passion for what it is that you're doing that you should be in the industry. And then fast forward a little bit more, she became a producer. She started working. She was doing all kinds of work with people, meeting people, getting everything together. And then this happened, Black Mass. And I started thinking about reviving Scars, and Black Mass was being pushed. And then I figured, who better to be working with on the relaunch but Michelle Romano. So she had the Black Mass, put me in touch with everybody in the Black Mass. She was in the Black Mass, produced the Black Mass. So it was meant to happen.
Yeah, because that issue is pretty much over half the issue.
Right.
And it's definitely a film people should go out and check out and see it, as it's one of those films that you have to go and see it blind.
Right.
If you read the synopsis, don't research.
Yep, don't research it. You got to go in there and unknowing.
Because the way I saw this film, I thought it was going to be one of those average, campy type of films. But I was like, had this chilling feel throughout the entire runtime.
Right.
Because I loved the way the screenplay was written in that film.
That was Brandon Slagle and Eric Pereira. They worked together on that. They did a really awesome job.
You get a great screenplay and an excellent lead performance, and then your film is really good.
Yeah, Andy Sykes played a good bad guy.
He did. As he was very creepy in that film.
Yes.
It's like...
Yeah, he pulled it off.
He's like on screen the entire time, pretty much.
Yep. But you never really see him.
That's what I liked about it, too.
Right.
It had
and that was on purpose.
That had like that John Carpenter Halloween vibe, where most of the film you don't see Michael Myers.
It was definitely a nice, disturbing little film. And I highly suggest watching it with people. So if you have a big TV and put it in and invite friends over who are into it, into that type of thing, because it'll definitely leave an impression.
Yeah, and I may go a little spoilery here, but I also like the way Davini makes a statement at the end of the film too.
Right.
Because I don't want to give anything away, but at least she recognizes who this film is about.
Right.
And that's another thing that I don't see in these types of films. It's more glorified. This
one definitely
doesn't feel glorified at all. And I don't like those types of films because I will not give the time of day for those types of films unless if it's really good and I have to see it, or it's a cannibal film. Because I can't stand cannibal films from the 70s and 80s.
Oh, yeah.
You also have another interesting story in this magazine about a poster artist in there. How did that come about? Andrew Kern.
He was, again, introduced to me by Michelle Romano, and he is the guy that did the poster art for the Black Mass. And then I started inquiring about his other work, and they sent me stuff, and his stuff's amazing. He does a lot of good fan stuff too. Like he'll do fan poster design. If you look him up and look at his work, his work is unbelievable. So it's like I immediately recognized it as this guy's going to go somewhere. As long as he keeps getting jobs, he's going to go somewhere, and his work is going to be the face of a lot of film. And I think, again, the way I make a magazine is I think that those people need to be recognized. So that's why I went in that direction, because I've been a movie fan since I was 5 years old, and part of the visuals is the advertising. So I figured the people that do that stuff need to be known as well. Not just the people in front of the camera, but the people behind everything that you see that has nothing to do with the camera.
Yeah, I love poster art because I remember when I was a child, I would go into the newspapers and look at them. And it would continue on during the years when we had the video store era. You would go to the video store and rent movies based on poster art.
Oh, absolutely.
I miss those days.
Oh, yeah. It's like, and this goes before Blockbuster and Hollywood Video. You'd walk into the mom and pop video store, and you'd pick up the box. If the cover was also like Deathstalker, that immediately you would pick that box up and you'd flip it over and read the synopsis. And then when I was like in my teens, I had my job and we would go on Fridays and we would get 8 movies and watch every single movie before Monday. And it was all based on looking at the box cover.
Yeah, those days are sadly gone.
Right. It's harder to find a good movie now because you can't physically pick up there's no movies anymore. You don't go into Walmart and flip through movies. You're flipping through a screen, and it's just not the same. It's definitely not the same.
That's why I'm always an advocate for physical media.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're trying to phase it out.
Of course, they always keep trying to phase it out, and it never seems to work.
Right. But the thing is, I know Walmart is getting rid of their physical media, and they're starting with the video games.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah.
Because streaming, you don't get that feel of holding the copy. Plus the fact that you're afraid that the major studios might edit the film or take the film down.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening.
It's sad, and thankfully these independent studios are keeping that alive.
Like Cleopatra.
Yeah, like Cleopatra, yes.
Shout Factory.
Shout Factory, Arrow.
Yeah, they're all doing a good Vinegar Syndrome.
Scream Team Releasing's another good one.
Yep. Wild Eye.
Yep, Wild Eye. They've had some good releases.
There's a whole bunch. Hopefully they just keep going.
I hope so too. Now, you have 2 options to get this magazine.
Yes.
The traditional print option and digital. What made you want to go for both?
Because everybody is different. So again, you told me that you prefer the digital. And then I have other people tell me that they prefer the traditional hard copy. So MagCloud, which is fantastic, you can buy 1 or you can buy 100, and they offer both. So I upload the magazine and instantly both are available. You can get the digital version and you can get the print version. The print version is a little more costly than I'd like because I'm trying to beef up the magazine because it's every other month, not every month. But the page count is how they base it for pricing. But digital, I forget. I think I have it up there for $4.99 or whatever. That'll never change. That price will never change, no matter how big the book is. So it's fantastic. So you can get the magazine and read it on your tablet, your phone, your computer, or it'll arrive at your door. So I like to have both options for people.
Since I got you here, why don't we talk a little bit about independent films, as I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
What is your opinion on independent horror today? Because mine is that we got some really good labels out that are trying to keep physical media alive, like Scream Team Releasing,
right?
Concept Media, Make Flicks.
The problem I'm having is finding the releases. YouTube's great for trailers, but there's no central location to find it, and there's no budget. Nobody is giving anybody a budget for advertising or for promotion. So these people are losing out a lot of the time, and then you hear about it years later, so it's tough. So the networking system, I think, needs to be like your podcast, for instance. You know, if people are downloading it and they hear us talking about it and you're mentioning these names, that's great. but we need more people to do it. More people need to advertise and promote. Just because these poor guys, girls don't get the exposure that, let's say, Universal is going to get, or even the Shudder. You know, there needs to be a way for more recognition.
Yeah, I truly agree on that. Seriously. Because literally, for me, it's like finding out these companies through YouTube, through Indiegogos, through conventions. But it's tough.
That leads me back to the question you had about why I cover a lot of independent. That's the reason. That's the big reason. And I mean, I'd like to put it out there and say, listen, if you have something that you want to push, feel free to email me or send it to me one way or another. And I'll gladly put you in the pages at some point. I think the whole industry, the independent industry, needs more coverage.
Yeah, it would benefit the industry as a whole.
Yes.
Especially when nobody's promoting you nowadays. Unless if you're Lloyd Kaufman, who's promoting himself every 5 minutes.
Well, that man's been doing that since the 70s. So
him and Charles Mann are the only two people that promote a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's the purpose. Making the product is a small part of the battle. It's how are people going to see the product? How are they going to hear about the product? Because gone are the days of the newspaper where on Friday afternoon, you opened that newspaper in the weekend section or whatever, and you saw full page ads for things. Even Friday the 13th had a full page ad. It was like, that's the kind of stuff that I loved and that I now miss, because you don't get the same thing on YouTube or Google.
Who do you see as some of the rising talents in indie horror, whether it's actors, actresses, or directors?
This is where the old man in me comes out. For some reason I'm learning as I go. So I learn about people watching things that are just like happenstance. I stumble across things. So it's hard for me to figure it all out. So Ty West is probably, but I mean, I've been covering Ty West since House of the Devil. Mia Goth, Eva Hamilton, Sarah Nicklin. Who else? Putting me on the spot.
How about Davini?
If she keeps doing stuff like what she just did, yeah, there's definitely there would be no holding back. I don't want to give anything away about the movie for people who haven't seen it, but I mean, she knows how to work in front of the camera.
I was thinking right after that film, she has to direct another film.
Yeah. And I think Scout Taylor Compton is working on some stuff now too.
Yeah, I know.
She's directing.
Yeah, I think she finished production on her film. I know she was talking about that on her podcast.
Yeah, there's another. She's there, like another one right after that too.
Oh, I didn't hear a second one. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's another one in the works.
Rob's brother's Spider wants another one.
Is he working on horror?
He did Bury the Bride, which was on Tubi, and Allegoria, which is on Shudder.
That's awesome. I'm gonna have to check those out.
He's Rob Zombie's brother.
Oh yeah, he was in the magazine too. Power Man 5000.
Yes.
Yep, he's in an issue, but not as a filmmaker.
As a musician.
I'd like to change that.
He's done a couple films. I know there's also a family known as the Addams Family not the TV show, that
Right.
have done some really good low-budget films. They did one like Hellbender, which was on Shudder recently, and The Deeper You Dig, which was released by Arrow Video.
Okay.
They're also another good batch of filmmakers. Family, I don't know where they're from, but it's just amazing what they do with a limited budget.
Yeah, you have to be creative, and people have to figure stuff out, and that's the one thing I can say without spoiling anything about The Black Mass was that whole thing was shot in 5 days.
Wow.
They did a lot of work in 5 days.
Wow. I didn't even think that. That was amazing. You would think there probably was maybe an 8-9 day shoot, but 5 days? Man.
5 days from beginning to end.
How can people get a hold of Scars Magazine?
Right now through magcloud.com.
Where can they find more information on Scars Magazine on the web and social media?
It is scarsmag.com and then scarsmag@gmail.com. And then we have an Instagram, which is scarsmag, and there's a Facebook page as well.
Ray, I want to thank you for coming on to my podcast.
My pleasure.
And have a good day.
You too.
You can follow Auntie T's Horror and Wrestling Show on these social media providers at Auntie T's Horror and Wrestling on Facebook, Instagram, and the Slasher app. You can find Auntie T's Horror and Wrestling Show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcast providers. You can also listen to the podcast at youtube.com/@FilmIKmedia and docdiscussions.com. What's Auntie T watching this episode? Well, Auntie T is watching another film this episode, everyone. Yes, it's a film that I talked about in episode 112. That's right, the podcast critic inside me won over the AI hating person inside me, as I'm talking about Late Night with the Devil. As you may remember, in episode 112, I talked about how I did not like how that film used AI even for a couple images. It's just, I am not a fan of AI. I'm still gonna complain about it because literally I really believe AI is taking away jobs personally, and I just don't like it when AI is there. Seriously, whether it's on the screen or used in daily life, I don't like it. But then again, it's something I'm probably going to have to get used to, everyone. In fact, we're probably going to have to get used to it as cinema fans because it's probably here to stay. But still, I really wanted to see this film so bad, to the point where I just really decided that the podcast critic in me won out over the AI hating side of me. Because Late Night with the Devil is a film I wanted to see at the beginning of this year because of all the great buzz that I've heard about this film. And I've decided to see this film, finally, on Shudder. Because yeah, I could have seen this in the theaters, but something tells me maybe this film might not play well in the theaters. And to me, when watching this film, my sense was right in some ways because of the fact that it's going for this like late night 70s TV show type vibe to it. And you want to watch that on a TV screen, not on the big screen. Sure, go see films in cinema, support independent films in cinema. But I had a hard time really making the effort to see this film in a theater because to me,
this film really felt like it looked like it needed to be seen on television, as it has all the 70s aesthetics. Now, this is a film I've been waiting for ever since hearing great reviews for this film, how it was blowing away film festivals that it played. So I was really hoping that this was going to be a great film, and I have to say this film has surpassed Immaculate as the best horror film of 2024. It just is. Seriously. As Late Night with the Devil is a great film. It is such a great horror film. It is something it's going to be looked back at the end of the year when I rewatch this film. Because I'm definitely going to be rewatching this film when determining what truly is the best film of 2024. Because literally, right now you got this film, Immaculate. You still got Ty West's film, Maxine, slated to come out later this year. That's a contender for best horror film of 2024. Anything with Ty West right now is a contender for best horror film. Seriously. But back to Late Night with the Devil. This was a great film. I was expecting this lost episode type film where everything would be just such a lost episode that you just feel like you're watching a lost episode of a TV show. But this did not feel like that. I like the fact that this episode first felt like pot documentary, pot fake episode. And it's a credit to the writers and directors of Late Night with the Devil, Cameron and Colin Keans, as the two really do a great job with everything in this film, whether it's the action or the way the film focuses on its main character throughout the film as he descends into madness. They make sure they do a great job in creating a story that really keeps you engaged with this film. As there are a lot of things that could have gone wrong with this film easily, because this is kind of a fake documentary / found footage film, as those subgenres are subgenres where things can go wrong very quickly if the action isn't paced right, if everything isn't done perfectly. Things can go off the rails really, really quickly. But it doesn't here. Both Cameron and Colin do a very good job in the way they keep the story moving. I like the fact that they get the backstory of this main character out of the way in the beginning of this film, as it sets up this film very well. And another thing that I liked about them was the fact their direction was excellent. Literally. I like the fact that they do a great job with the way they direct their actors here. I like the way they make sure the action is terrifying, especially that last third of the film. As that and Immaculate are two of the most craziest endings to a horror film in like the last 5 years. And this is all happening in the same year, everyone. I didn't think I would have that on my horror bingo card for 2024. Two crazy third acts. But we do have two crazy third acts this year so far that come out of nowhere, as the last third of this movie was just pure insanity. I love the way that the brothers do a great job directing the action in that last third of this film. It was intense. It grabbed my attention. It's something that really deserves your time. And before I go into the acting aspects of this film, I have to say this is probably the most technical sound film of this year so far. It has great makeup, as the makeup really makes it look like the characters were from the 70s. I liked the fact that the cinematography in this film was great, whether it was the black and white cinematography or the full-frame cinematography in which the brothers chose, along with their cinematographer, to go with this film, as it really added to this film. It makes this film unique. This also has a great score as well. But another thing that really makes this film very good was the acting in this film. As the brothers really do a good job with the way they direct their actors and cast here, as each of the cast were very good in their roles. They gelled well with one another, provided some very good tense moments, including the exorcism scene in the film. That was a really good moment in the film. Or whether we had this trippy last 15-20 minutes of this film was also very insane as well. That was a really great way to end this film, as I literally did not expect the film to end the way I thought it was going to end, but it did. It's another reason why I like the screenplay a lot. I literally thought the screenplay was going to go one way, but it went the other way. And that's what I want. I want to be kept off guard at times. I want to be surprised at the ending. Because going into this film, I thought it was going to end one way. I'm not telling you what it is, because I would spoil the film for you. Because you would know what the other way is. So I'm not going to go into it. Another thing that I really loved about this film was the performances. Especially the lead performance of this film by David Dastmalchian, who people might know from James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, where he played Polka Dot Man. Yes, that was a superhero, everyone. But anyway, Dastmalchian does a very good job in this film, giving one of the best performances of the year, as he really does a good job really balancing all aspects of his character, whether it's in the humor moments in the film or towards the end of the film when this film goes into maximum overdrive. He really plays his character very well and very seriously. He really does a great job in making this character a very interesting character, as this character goes from one end to the other during the course of this film. As this film starts off as a late night talk show, a regular late night talk show, where you get the jokes and everything like you would see in a normal talk show. And he really plays that host role very well. But when it really got to the horrifying aspects of this film, he really takes it up a couple notches in his performance. He really makes his character interesting. He really does make sure that his performance keeps you invested in his character as he spirals into madness towards the end of the film. I also really like the fact that he does a great job with his co-stars as well, as he really has some really good chemistry, especially with the doctor character and the magician who's trying to debunk everything that goes on during the course of this film. And speaking of that magician character, he was also a highlight of this film. Every time he would enter this film, it was in a way that it brought energy, it brought the film to another perspective, and the performance is very good. It was done by actor Ian Bliss. He really does a great job making this magician who's out there to expose everything about magic. I thought Bliss did a great job with his character, as he really pretty much steals every scene that he's in almost. Every time he injects himself into this film, he just steals it by really making sure that this character is such a you-know-what. It brought more tension to the film, especially when you needed dramatic tension to the film, to offset the fact that there's literally no horrifying action going on until late in the film. I like that character a lot, and I really love that performance too, because that performance really kept this movie going too, to the point that it keeps you watching this film, because literally sometimes you need a very good supporting performance to keep the plot moving until we get to the climax and until the action. And the acting from Ian Bliss in this film was just great in this film. He did a great job with his role. It was to contradict everything that was going on and to keep the plot moving. I like the fact that the writers had a character like this in this film, because it really kept this film moving along. A combination of a character like that plus an actor who can pull a performance like that really helps a film move along when you don't have much horror going on. And the combination of the two works perfectly well here in Late Night with the Devil, as you need some sort of that to keep the dialogue scenes moving along. You need something like that to keep the pace going, and it does very well. I like the fact that they came up with this magician who's out to debunk everything that is supernatural and magic. It kept everything moving along. That was smart on the writer's part, and it was also a very good casting choice too, as I really think Ian Bliss should get more films after this role, seriously, as he really can pull these types of roles off as the antagonist. As there's a couple of antagonists in this film. He's like the minor antagonist, but still, he pulled that off very well. Overall, Late Night with the Devil is a great film, with great performances, great direction, great screenplay. The fact that it's edited very well and has a really good soundtrack. This might be the most complete film of 2024, and we're only in May. I haven't seen Maxine yet. I haven't seen Terrifier 3 yet. I haven't seen that Wild Card film yet. And I'm sure there'll be a Wild Card film or two in there that might give this film a run for its money at being the best film of 2024. But Late Night with the Devil right now is the most complete film I've seen all year in terms of acting, direction, storytelling, cinematography, editing, makeup, costumes, you name it. This is definitely worth checking out on Shudder, as I really truly believe Late Night with the Devil is probably going to be one of the top 5 films of 2024, if not the top film of 2024. I know it's May, and I said that about Immaculate too, that film could be the best film too. Now I'm saying Late Night with the Devil is probably the best film of 2024. It's just a complete film. Everything went completely right in my opinion. 5 stars. Next episode, I got a couple of ideas I'm thinking of, so I don't want to give anything away, just in case I decide to do something else, obviously. So with that, I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. You can find more information on this podcast and keep up to date with this podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and the Slasher app at Anthony T's Horror and Wrestling. You can listen to this podcast on Dark Discussions Podcast, a Film Arcade Media YouTube channel at youtube.com at Film Arcade Media. You can also listen to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, and other podcast providers. With that, I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. Have a good day. Support indie wrestling and support indie horror. This has been a Film Arcade Media production.